Second Timothy chapter 2. You then, my child, be strengthened by the grace that is in Christ Jesus, and what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men that they may be able to share with others also. It was on March 9th, 1968, that Heritage Christian University, or at least the school that would become known as Heritage Christian University, was chartered here in Florence, Alabama. Originally, it was known as the Southeast Institute of the Bible, later to become International Bible College, and then about 23 years ago, renamed Heritage Christian University when we started our graduate programs. About 2 years into its existence, the school went through a restructuring, and so had all new administration, an all new board, and that new board began the process of looking for a president. They landed on Charles Coyle. In an interview in 1987, here's what Brother Coyle had to say, because when they originally approached him about being president, it was not something he was seeking and felt that there were others better suited. But let me share his words on what happened. He said, I had never seen myself in the role of a college president. So I gave the groups the names of highly qualified men for their consideration. The group asked me to reconsider after the men I had recommended all pled that they had other obligations. I asked for time to think and to pray. The group told me that if I did not accept, they would sell the property and give the receipts to an established Christian college. IBC was a dream that I was willing to make a reality, so I accepted. No one else would take the job. And the rest, as they say, is history. I want you to think about that moment in time when literally this university was on the edge of a cliff. Would she move forward with her mission of making ministers for God's glory, or would she close her doors forever? Charles Coyle had to make a decision. Would he step into the gap? Would he allow this dream that was voiced in a meeting in 1965, in November of 1965? There was a gathering of church leaders in the old home place of T.B. Larimore. And someone at that meeting, we don't even know his name, said, we need a Bible college in Florence, Alabama. Florence is literally the belt buckle of the Bible Belt. So as you think about him saying, we need a Christian college here, in 1970, Charles Coyle had to make a decision that would impact whether that dream would come to an end. He chose to step into the gap. He chose to take on the responsibility. He dreamed big dreams. He organized the school so that it was more like your standard college and university model with curriculum and syllabi and all that goes with that. And we will never be the same. Literally, we are here because he was there. Today is Heritage Christian University's Day of Giving. It's really a day of celebrating our heritage, and I like that we chose, or it was chosen before I came, that name Heritage, because we have a heritage of courage and faith and commitment to God and the training of church leaders that allows us to be here today. We literally are standing on the shoulders of giants. So we're going to celebrate some of those today. And we also want you to realize, many of you that are joining us throughout the day, you've been with us for years. You are some of the giants whose shoulders we stand on. You've made sacrifices. Some of you have labored here on the campus. Some of you are alumni of the university. Some of you have made financial donations. We're here because you were there. We want you to know you're valued, you're appreciated, that you're important, and that you're changing eternity. Maybe some of you that will join us today, you're thinking about the role that you could play with Heritage Christian University. I often like to say that each of us as an individual, we have to decide, or I have to decide, and you have to decide, am I just going to live or am I going to leave a legacy? If you've made the decision in your life that you're going to not just live and exist, you're going to leave a legacy and leave a mark on the world for God's glory, then we'd like to ask you to think about making Heritage Christian a part of that legacy, because you're going to be training students who are our average age, I think, is in the mid 30s. We've got students of all ages who are being trained to go out and be teachers and preachers and youth ministers and counselors and education specialists, etc., that are going to teach people about Jesus and help to disciple and transform people in the image of Christ as God's power works in their lives. You can make a difference that literally impacts eternity. As I think back to 1970 and that choice that Charles Coyle had to make, I think about today. We have 179 students seeking degrees, associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, 3 levels of master's degrees. Based on our records, that's the most students we've ever had seeking accredited degrees. What if? What if he had said no? What if the many people who have worked here and taught here, what if the many people who made donations and sacrifices had said no? But they didn't. And because of that, we can stand on their shoulders and see further than ever before. We are indebted to them. What if you say yes today? What you think about at the end of this life, when we're standing before the Lord, what we're going to be most proud of is not how many boats or cars we have or how big a house we lived in. What we're going to be proud of when we stand before the creator of the universe is what we've done with our lives for his glory. You'll never regret taking some of the blessings that God has given you and sharing it with a ministry that makes ministers, to help us to be able to train students and not only give them the finest of biblical and ministerial and academic education, but for them to potentially to be able to graduate with those accredited degrees and have no debt. Next week, we're going to have a visiting team from the Association of Theological Schools, and we're hoping to add that accreditation to our grad program. I will stack up the quality in scripture and in academics of this university with any place I know of or have ever worked. And that is no slight of those other universities. It's just how much I think of this place. But I want you to think about that we not only want them to have an amazing education so that they can serve in God's kingdom, but we want them to be able to do that without debt. Last year, 86% of our graduates graduated with an accredited degree in Bible and Scripture, and they borrowed no money to get their degree from us. And those who did borrow did very little. The year before, 100% of our graduates graduated without borrowing a dime. That's only made possible because of generous hearts and a great God. So stay with us throughout the day as we celebrate an awesome God. Here, our priorities are God, church, students. God always comes first. Everything that has happened here is by His doing. We are just instruments in His hand, and they are for His glory. So stay with us today as we celebrate our great and awesome God, and we commemorate some amazing people along the way who have poured their hearts into this mission and into our students. We're going to have a brief transition, and then a few of us will come back on screen and talk about some memories. But thank you for being with us today and for partnering with us in our ministry of making ministers for His glory. Welcome back to Giving Day at Heritage Christian University. I am here with our Vice President of Advancement, JT Harrison, and our Vice President of Administration, Philip Gold, and each of us are just going to share some memories. So as we think, we're just going to reminisce down through the years. We especially want to share some thoughts about how we became connected to Heritage, some memories or connections with Brother Coyle, who is just hugely important to the history of this school, and also Brother Wayne Kilpatrick, who will be delivering his last lecture today. I think after 48 years, I believe, of being a part of this university. As I think back, my first memory of a connection here was in the IBC days back in the 80s. My dad was trained as an engineer. He worked in Huntsville. He's a graduate of Alabama Huntsville, and started out in the space and rocket industry and then went over into the automotive industry. But my dad is the most evangelistic person I know. So back in the 80s, among many people he led to Christ, was a young man through the prison ministry. And when that young man got out of prison or out of jail there, mom and dad paid for him to come to International Bible College and get a degree so he could go out and serve in the Lord's name. So that's my first connection, my first memory back in the 80s when I was junior high and high school. It's more high school of that interaction in college. And then later, 2005, while I was preaching at the Graymere congregation in Columbia, I taught a short course here, a graduate course. Actually, it wasn't a short course, it was a full semester course dealing with ministering to families and dealing with families in crisis and those kinds of things as a grad class. And the only reason I didn't continue to teach adjunct was that I got into a doctoral program and something had to give. But I love this school. No, so many people I've known over the years who have worked here. I think of my dear friend Rusty Pettis. He, in fact, my girls define a youth minister based on Rusty and Dana Pettis as we worked together at the Graymere congregation. I can remember times past when we would visit churches. I would say, as we were thinking about where we might place membership when I was teaching, and how did the teen class go? Oh, it was fine, but he was no Rusty. And so, Rusty worked here for years. He loved the school. He still loves this school, and just I have so much respect for this school. I've always known of outstanding faculty that exist here. And so I'm just been grateful to be a part of it. I guess it was December of 2017 when the decision was made that sat down at a Cracker Barrel, I believe it was, with Don Posey, and we decided that they were willing to work with me, and I was excited about working with them. And then started, I guess, on the payroll in June of that year. So talk to me about your connections. As we think about, let me just quickly mention Brother Coyle. I never got a chance to meet Brother Coyle. I've met several members of all his children and or several of the children. And for me, I've heard his sermons. In fact, in my biblical preaching class, which will be finishing up next week, I require my students to listen to about 10 different other preachers, and they have to do an evaluation of certain things in their lessons. And one of the ones that they have to listen to is Brother Coyle. And so I've got a sermon that he actually delivered here at Heritage Christian, and they listen to it and evaluate it. And I tell them there's two reasons for that. First of all, you need to know him. You need to know, learn, you need to know because he's a part of your heritage as a student, but he's also one of the finest preachers you'll ever hear. In fact, I was talking to faculty member Jeremy Barrier yesterday, and he talked about when he first met Brother Coyle. Jeremy said his dad, Wayne, introduced him to Brother Coyle and said, basically, son, this is the greatest living preacher
Wow.
in the brotherhood. And that's high praise. And so I want our students to know him. So I'll be quiet for the rest of the time. Which one of you wants to go first? Tell your story memories. As I think about Wayne, the things that I've enjoyed interacting with him on campus, we talk a lot about Latin America because he has a passion for Latin America. He actually has taught for us at the Bible School of the Americas. I remember when I got here saying, you need to write down all you know in your head about restoration movement because you know things nobody else knows. And I know that when I travel to churches, he is more known, I think, than anybody else on this campus as I travel. What are your memories and how did you become connected to this school?
Well, I can tell you that if it were not for Brother Coyle, I would not be sitting here today. I grew up in Kentucky, a little town called Tompkinsville,
Mhm.
and I was destined, I thought, to major in agriculture, and I was headed for Western Kentucky University. I was one of five children, and we had very little financial means. And I was only going to Western because I had grants and scholarships. And Charles Coyle was staying in the home of one of the members of the church at one of the other congregations in that area. And I my memory serves correctly, I was the only one at home that day. And there were no cell phones back then, of course. And I answered the phone, and this brother said, I'd like for you to come and meet Charles Coyle. And I met Brother Coyle, and Brother Coyle said, JT, I would love for you to come and visit IBC, of course, now Heritage. And I said, Brother Coyle, I'm just not cut out to be a preacher, and I'm going to major in agriculture. He said, but just come and take a look. And I'd never even been in the state of Alabama. And Brother Coyle had a way of kind of making you do something. He had a stern look and so I came down, and there were summer classes going on at the time, and I got to visit with some of the teachers and students, and there was this spirit of evangelism that I'd never seen before. And so I came back and still believing that I was going to Western. And a couple of weeks later, uh, someone from our another congregation approached me and had told me that if I wanted to go to IBC, that there were congregations and individuals that would support me to come be a student here. And that touched my heart.
Amen.
And I came here, and I tell people that meeting Brother Coyle was one of the most important days of my life. And and when I got here, Brother Coyle continued to influence my life. I, Brother Coyle was a man that loved to preach. I really believe that he would preach every day if he had an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. And I remember him preaching in chapel and always emphasizing uh, going into all the world and preaching the gospel. And even if he didn't speak in chapel, he would stand up every day at the end for 2 or 3 minutes and talk about going to all the world and preaching to the gospel, preaching the gospel. He made us want to run right out the door right then and convert the world. And a funny little thing that he would do, that he would end his remarks by many times by singing the chorus of the song, Blessed Be the Name of the Lord. And so every time I hear someone sing that song, I think about Brother Coyle. So Brother Coyle just made such an impact on so many people. And I love him, and I think he's one of the most important people in my life. And I think without him, perhaps the school wouldn't exist today, because the school went through some tough times, and he helped the school weather those times. And I think the school came through them because of him and a lot of other people. Um, as far as uh, Wayne is concerned, do you want me to talk about him now, or you rather pass that on to?
Go ahead. Talk about
Keep
Wayne.
talking, brother. You're doing great.
Well, when I moved here, Wayne was also one of the first people that I met, and I fell in love with Wayne from the beginning. But really, before I became a close friend of Wayne, he was my boss. Uh, Naturally, when you're a broke student and have no means of support, you need money. And Wayne was a subcontractor. And I went to work for Wayne and hanging sheetrock and nailing down subflooring and, uh, you know, putting additions onto houses and blowing popcorn ceilings and different things like that. And Wayne and I spent a lot of time together. Well, we developed this friendship, and that friendship started about 48 years ago. And Wayne's friendship and Wayne and Brenda's friendship is developed where it's long since no longer been a friendship.
That's powerful.
Wayne and Brenda are truly our family,
Amen.
and we have been through a lot together, and they've been a blessing to us in more ways than I can even count. Wayne has been the same Wayne that I've known for 48 years. Uh, they have sacrificed and have given to more people, including our family, than I can ever begin to imagine. And um, they love the Lord, they love people, and they love my family. And I don't know what it's going to be like not having them here
I
on
suspect he'll be
campus.
sneaking on campus.
Yeah.
We'll be disappointed if he
I
doesn't.
hope so.
Talk to us, Brother Philip. How'd you get connected? And
Well, my connection goes back to the mid '90s, but it actually I think goes back to maybe the mid '70s. I didn't know Brother Coyle personally, and so I'm thankful that we have so much of his preaching recorded.
Mhm.
And in fact, when I was doing advancement work, I think it was probably 20 years ago. But Charles Payne, another of our key people from the early days, because Brother Coyle, he sacrificed, and then he found other people who were willing to make big sacrifices and big commitments. And Charles Payne sells a dry cleaning business in Texas and moves to Northwest Alabama to help this school. And so Charles Payne had found a bunch of these recordings, and so he put them in a format, and we did a direct mail piece, and we offered donors copies of these sermons. And I just remember that being very well received, because so many of the people who are involved in the school knew Brother Coyle, and they wanted copies of his sermons. And so that was a big thing. But Vernon Shuffett,
Mm-hmm.
who was heavily influenced by those big workshops in the early days where you'd have 10,000 people in Florence and by Brother Coyle. He was one of our elders in Southern Illinois where my dad was preaching, and um, he sold a CPA business. And what I didn't realize as a young person at that time, we had joy buses, the bus program, and this quiet, stereotypical CPA was actually the driving energy behind that bus program.
Mm-hmm.
And so he sold his CPA firm, wanted to come here as a student, which he did. He wanted to do mission work, and that was actually sort of the beginning of the decline of the bus program there. But he came, and when he finished, Brother Coyle and others encouraged him. They said, you know, you could have a powerful ministry by staying here, working with the school, and putting some financial systems in place for us to give us stability. And so Brother Shuffett did that. Well, fast forward to the late '90s, and I was looking to come this direction, and I'd had some contact with Brother Shuffett, and at this point he was starting to think about retirement. And so I came to work in the business office at the school because of Brother Shuffett's influence. And of course it changed the course of my life. It moved me toward ministry. Wouldn't trade all that for anything. And so all of that goes back to, you know, Brother Coyle influenced people to make big commitments, and people to sell businesses and devote their lives to ministry. And that's, you know, we still in the business office today, the foundation of what we do, you can see Brother Shuffett's influence still in that. And so it goes all the way back to those early days. I love JT's story because when you visit with alumni, so many times it's a very similar story about,
Mm-hmm.
if it's not Brother Coyle saying, hey, you need to look at this school, he influenced others to recruit students in that same way, by saying, you know, you're important, you need to come look, or I'm going to come show up on your doorstep.
Yeah.
And see if we can help you make a transition. And so that's been very, very good. Wayne Kilpatrick, um, you got to know Wayne early on when I started working here, and I didn't work for Wayne, but I hadn't lived here long, and I had to hire Wayne to do some work for me. We had a little water incident at the house that flooded a downstairs area, and so Wayne was the contractor who came and redid all the sheetrock and the ceilings and all of that. And so to have him in your home telling stories and getting to know him that way, it was huge early on. And we honored him one year during our alumni event, and we did some T-shirts, and the T-shirt said, "Before there was Google, there was Wayne." And because if there was a history of the church question, he was the human Google
I said
before.
somebody this week, we need to resurrect that T-shirt.
We could do that. We could do that. So those are some of my memories, and I'm thankful for people who sacrificed to help get us connected. I think of Brother Overton, you know, thankful that while I didn't know Brother Coyle, Brother Overton was still here when I arrived. And so I was able to learn a little bit from him near the end of his ministry.
You know, I think about my my dad's older brother, Buddy or Leland Brothers. He passed away probably about a year and a half or two after I'd taken this position, or God had brought us here. And he was so excited that I was working, as he would put it, with Brother Overton School, because Brother Overton baptized my uncle and my aunt. I think it was when he was preaching at the Tusculum congregation, and it just was like, okay, what you're doing is okay, because Brother Overton used to teach there, and he was just a master in a lot of. He was I think of Brother Cole as the consummate preacher. I think of Brother Overton as just one of the best teachers you're ever going to hear. Smart, amazing on Christian evidences, for example. Just
And as far as I still know, we still have his biblical case for Christianity, his set of videos out on our YouTube channel.
Yes.
It's kind of a tie to our history.
Brother Overton was a man that could speak on the highest level, and then he could speak on a level that even I could understand.
Right.
that's a gift to be able to do that.
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, thank you both for what you do. We're grateful that you're part of the Heritage family, and we are just trying to celebrate people like the folks we've talked about. We happen to have talked about some men in this few moments, but I'm going to tell you there's an army of ladies. Sister Coyle would be
Yes.
at the front of that, who simply, if it were not for them, we're not here. And so we do want today to celebrate the giants who allowed us to stand on their shoulders. You talked about Brother Shuffett. One of my regular references now, I wish I'd read it more early, is his book on the history of IBC. And I'm hope we can follow it up with a history that picks up with the name
Yes.
change to Heritage.
Right.
I think about when I started my segment at the beginning of this broadcast. I started with 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, about what you've learned from me, share with faithful men that they may share with others. That was a guiding passage for Brother Coyle. He loved preaching the gospel, but he also loved preparing preachers of the gospel. And so that idea of passing on what has been passed on to you was a cornerstone of how he lived. And it's a cornerstone of what we do here at Heritage Christian University, where making ministers is our ministry. And we hope as we go through the day that you'll see how God has blessed us in fulfilling that mission. And to be honest, we hope you'll be inspired to join us or to continue to partner with us by financially supporting what God is doing to make those ministers. May you have a blessed and wonderful day.